I'd like to first acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today and acknowledge their elders past and present and Aboriginal colleagues and friends that I can see in the group. So there's so much that I can talk to you about in regards to the Housing Appeals Committee, but I thought about what is the key message for me to deliver in the 10 to 15 minutes that I have. And the key sort of messages that I agreed to talk to you about today is what this means for you, why am I here today at all, and to tell you a bit of a story from a provider's perspective in terms of what you can benefit from a tenant's perspective, and then to explain how the appeal system works in a very simple example. Does that sound good? Yeah. So the Housing Appeals Committee is an independent body in terms of the decision-making process, and we review decisions made by social housing providers, and those decisions are decisions that affect applicants and tenants. What needs to happen before an appeal can be brought to the HAC is a decision needs to be made based on your policy. Following that initial decision, you also need to be prepared to conduct an internal appeal, also referred to as an internal review. So that's the starting point, and that's what we do currently. How we operate is through a ministerial charter, and the other governance main document is the New South Wales Social Housing External Appeals Policy Framework, which is also endorsed by the Minister for Family and Community Services. So these two documents are important because this is our link to you. This is the document that actually refers to your inclusion in our process. So the good news today is you don't have to do very much at all, actually, and that's the truth. Because we're already established, we exist, and our system works really well. I'll talk to you a bit later on about what are the things that you need to do to implement our system. The other sort of thing that we do for the sector is we provide really good training to frontline and managers in terms of good decision making. So the policies that you are putting together, I imagine some of you in the audience are already registered, some of you are registered under the National, under PARS, and some of you may be perhaps considering some of those options. But regardless, you would have a policy framework of some sort, am I right? By which you make decisions that affect your tenants. So that is something that we provide. I'm not broadcasting it too loudly today because we have a very small staff establishment, and like Neil pointed out, I have to really be careful around how I allocate those resources to make sure we can deliver, what we need to do most efficiently. We can also advise you on systemic issues arising out of appeals, which is a really good service, free of charge to you. And policy interpretation, where we might, for example, receive a case from one of your tenants that highlights contradicting sections in your own policy. And we also strive to improve decision making on the whole, and this is the operational policy related decision making. If you're putting together a new policy, particularly if it relates to appeals or complaints or any type of access to your housing, you are free to send it in to us if you're particularly concerned about a section of your policy and you want a second opinion. Again, as long as you give us enough notice, we generally do provide that feedback. Of course, you do have your resourcing peak bodies as well to rely on for that. And why am I here today? Well, as part of your registration process, so whether you are currently PARS registered or nationally registered, or indeed if you're considering registration. So if your organisation is yet to make a decision, this is still very important information for you. Because it's implemented as of now. There is no official start date, but there's also no panic around it. So if one of your tenants today lodged an appeal with us, we could indeed proceed with that appeal. That's important information for you. And to date, we've actually heard over, I can tell you, 9,500 appeals since 1995. So we're no novices. We know what we're doing, and we do it quite well. In a recent customer satisfaction survey, we received over 80% satisfaction rate with our services, and that's from a broad range of the sector, not just people that got a good outcome from their appeal. Generally speaking, about 10% of all our clients are Aboriginal, but I have to say most of those are living in public housing managed tenancies. I imagine that as we include your organisations in our system, that will increase. We're hoping that it'll increase. Why? Because we see that as a really good sign of transparency and of accessibility. And that's really why we're here today to, I guess I had a look at the Aboriginal Housing Office mission statement and on the folders, handout folders, and I thought that actually is so true, and that's why we're here, to provide equity of access to an appeals process that everybody else in social housing has access to. So what are the benefits for you? It's free of charge, so there's no cost to you, no direct cost to participate in the appeals system. Obviously, it may mean that you will need to review what's on your websites if you have information on websites, have a look at your waiting room areas. At the moment, we're conducting a statewide mail-out, I'm told, or we're about to commence that, and we have developed really good promotional materials, including posters, and we worked closely with the Aboriginal Housing Office on this project, as well as with Adele from the Federation. And I have to acknowledge the artist here, who was Soretta Fielding. So we've used Soretta Fielding's artwork in our publications. So once you receive the mail out, please display the posters in the areas where your tenants can see them, and you'll also receive about 10 to 20 appeal forms and some fact sheets in that as well. So the benefits to your organisation, other than being free to participate, it's very quick, and actually it's very easy. And my staff will guide you through the expectations. So once we receive an appeal form, which can be lodged online, we're fully digital at the moment. So if your organisation is regionally based and your clients may not be able to access a post office, they can just lodge a hack form online. It's also for free. And the whole process can take between 4 and 6 weeks. If it's a very complicated matter, it can take longer than that, but we will communicate with you on that. A common question I get asked is, how do we know if one of our tenants appeals to you, Yasmina? Well, you will know, because the first people we speak to is the organisation, and we would generally ask for the decision to be sent through to us and the reasons for your decision, as well as the policy that you've used to reach that decision. So I don't have time today to cover all of those processes, but as part of our communication strategy with providers, we have planned for some visits and info sessions that we're still talking to the AHO around in terms of best timing. I'm recognising that you've got all this change that's sort of being rolled out slowly, so we don't want to overburden with too many new things coming at you. Our process is also very good because, as I mentioned earlier, we provide you really good policy feedback following cases heard, and that can inform further improvements and continuous improvement internally. And it's confidential and respectful. We don't talk to other organisations about your appeals, and we don't talk to other clients about our appellants, so it's completely confidential. Culturally appropriate hearings is what you can expect. We currently have 3 Aboriginal members, and wherever we have an appeal from an Aboriginal client, we will list an Aboriginal member to preside over those hearings. And that's for good reason. It's to provide specific culturally appropriate questions if necessary, but also insider information. We have some members that are from regional areas, so there's things that we just won't know about particular issues in those regional areas. So the benefits for your clients, I haven't got a slide on that, but I'll just talk to you about that, are actually very similar to what I have up here. But obviously the most important benefit for clients is that it's trying to achieve that equity of access. And I say trying to because we're not there yet. And it is our mission to make sure that Aboriginal people, regardless of where they're living in terms of subsidised social housing broader, have access to an independent appeals process. And for that process to be independent and professional, for it to be easy, efficient, fair and free of charge to clients. So you can see that a lot of those benefits to you also transfer across to your clients. I have to also make mention that when Aboriginal people decide to lodge an appeal with us, over half of them receive a successful outcome, and that is higher than non-Aboriginal clients. So what do you need to do from today? As I said earlier, there's no panic and there's nothing that you need to do right this minute. The system already exists. If you are currently registered, then you're already included. Obviously, this might be the first time you're hearing about the Housing Appeals Committee, and that's okay, because my staff will be in touch with you fairly soon through different mediums. But what I would ask that you do is just have a look at how decisions are being made internally around tenancy matters, and are they being documented? Are they made according to your policy, or are they made the way they have always been made? So just check in with your staff on that. Make sure that you have a complaints and an appeals policy, and that staff or members of your organisation know where to find it, how to use it. Applying policy and decision making, it requires specific skills, and it is part of the training that we roll out, but I'm sure that the Federation have fabulous resources on their websites for organisations to access. I think I've been told I only have 2 minutes, but I've already wasted 30 seconds. So there's so much more to tell you, but what I can say is there are about 55 appellable decisions, separately appellable decisions. There's lots, so that's not all of them. But the key to that is if you provide a service and you have that policy, then that's your test. That means the person can appeal that decision. The most common decisions that we expect to be appealed from ACHPs, I'll use an acronym, there you go, are about rent setting. That's by far the number one issue that we get from community housing generally. And the reasons for that are many, but I'll give you a classic example. You might have Rose, who's a tenant of yours, and Jack, the nephew, comes and stays with Rose, and the housing officer or the Land Council member declares that that person is now living there, so the rent is adjusted, increased, possibly some backdating of rent occurs. Rose believes it's unfair, no one's listened to her, and she has a right to appeal. So that's a classic sort of background to a very common appeal issue. The others that we expect to see are succession of tenancy. How many of you have that service in your organisation? Yeah, a few hands. So if you don't have a policy that's listed, and if you don't provide that service, then we can't accept an appeal on it. That's how that works. And we will apply your policy in the appeals, not a different one. Okay, that will be in your package. We don't hear appeals about maintenance issues or repairs. And we don't take appeals about complaint matters. So how will we support you through this period of change? I've already talked about a bit of this. So we have produced wonderful publications, and I'll just ask Hoy to just hold one of our posters up so you remember it, and when it arrives in the mail, please, you'll remember what that looks like, place it somewhere in a prominent position. And we're still working very closely with the AHO around timing and participation in some general information sessions at the Regional Aboriginal Housing Committee meetings. So that's what a hearing process looks like. It's informal. Usually we have 2 members and 1 client, or 2 members, a client and a support person. It goes for about an hour. It's not a legalistic process, it's an informal merits review model. And there are wonderful Aboriginal members. Some of you may know these wonderful people. So we have Annie Druitt, Blanche Lake and Neva Collings. And that's the end of my slide show. I just need to mention we're currently recruiting for new members. This is my free sort of announcement. And the recruitment activity closes on the 3rd of October. So if you're interested, there is the email address down the bottom. Feel free to inquire. And it's also on our website. Thank you.